Hello, everyone. Awesome. Great to see you all here. People are still filtering in, but first off, thank you all for being here at today's WorkTango Work Culture webinar. I'm noticing all the folks in the chat from all over, everywhere from UK, the US, Canada. I saw some folks talk about the Stars. I was actually in Dallas speaking at an event recently and was rooting for the Stars. Now that my Leafs are out. But I'm very, very grateful that you're all here today. If we haven't met yet, my name is Rob Catalano. I'm one of the co-founders and the Chief Strategy Officer at WorkTango. And you're here at our Work Culture webinar series. And we have a passion to bring together our community so that we can engage with them, inspire them, and really connect each other as we navigate through this world of work. Amazing people from all over Wisconsin. I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks, which I'm excited about. I'm excited to talk about today's topic, which is around a speak up culture. And the reason why this topic is so important and why I wanted to bring it up and critical to me is that back, in the first days of WorkTango, when we actually started the organization, it was all about employee listening, right? How do we understand employee sentiment? How do we build space and an environment where we can understand what's on their minds? And it's really the topic we want to talk about today. So before I actually, introduce our speaker, I have a few housekeeping things and things I wanted to align on. First is that this is meant to be a conversation, interactive. And a couple of ways we're going to do that is that, through the chat, feel free to add your comments and your notes. There's a lot of people on this webinar, so it's going to be pretty fast and furious. So we want people to provide their chats. If you have any issues or challenges, feel free to place it in there. My colleague Alicia is going to take care of you. But from a Q&A perspective, please provide questions in the Q&A. I'm going to do my best to be the voice for all of you. I've been given permission by our speaker to dive in and interrupt and ask questions that you're all asking. So definitely put your questions in the Q&A. You can actually upvote them so that if you really want a question to be answered or discussed, we'll try to curate it that way. There's usually a lot of questions. So again, just wanted to have some housekeeping before we got started today. That being said, I'd love to introduce our speaker today, Stephen Shedletzky. Stephen, where are you? Let me pop on camera here. There we go. How are you?
I'm good. There's a match here between picture and what's on video, so it's great to be with you, Rob.
Awesome. Well, Shed, who's known as Shed, is a leadership speaker, an author, a coach, and I'm so happy to have him here because I've seen him speak so many other times, and I'm just a big fan of your work and your focus and a lot of the passion you bring to building great workplaces. Early in his career, Simon was he was struck by Simon Sinek's vision of a more inspired and safe and fulfilled world. He was actually the fourth person to join that team, and in 2011 co-hosted the Start With Why podcast. And then he took other roles in terms of the chief of staff, lead igniter, and head of brand experience training and development. And I think has taken a lot of that experience and has written a book recently about a speak up culture, which is the main topic for today's conversation. So I'm excited to introduce you, Stephen. I wanted to hand the floor to you, but I'm not going to let you off too easy. Before, just to round out that introduction, you picked the song for today, so I'm curious about what that was and why, but also what's something about you that we wouldn't read on your LinkedIn profile to learn a little more about you.
Thank you, Rob. A pleasure to be with you again. I think this is fifth maybe event we've done together, and so delighted to be sharing the message from my new book, Speak Up Culture, with you and everyone here live and listening in. The song was Harry Styles, Canyon Moon, I believe. If we have to pay royalties for that, I'm very sorry. WorkTango will be picking up that bill. I must thank the Spotify algorithm for suggesting that one, and I love that track. And I also love what Harry Styles stands for, and he's very I think an advocate very much for gender and gender fluidity. And so, he's someone out there using their platform to do good and create change and also great music. So that's the song. Something people may not know about me, though I do love my Toronto Maple Leafs first and foremost. I do bleed blue, but for the Toronto Blue Jays, that's my favorite sport, my favorite team. So I'm a little concerned that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. might be on the injured list here with some discomfort in the knee. So send your best to Vladdy, unless you're another AL team. And I used to teach water skiing and barefooting for 6 summers in Haliburton, Ontario. So that is not something that is it's probably on my resume, but it's not easy to find online. So that's another thing.
I have a huge respect for people that can do that. I think I tried it once and zero chance I got up on one of those things.
Well, you definitely felt muscles that you didn't know could be sore. I'm sure that definitely happened. So yeah, I mean, if it makes sense, Rob, we can hop in. I can share what a speak up culture is and sort of the inspiration for me behind this work. And then I know this will be a conversation between you and I, and amazing to see that we have over 200 folks here. So please ask your questions and comments as we go, and Rob and the team will help us address those as those come in, and feel free to use both the chat and the Q&A. So I have this book. It's finally finished-ish. If for anyone who's out there who's attempted to write a book or who has written a book, the number of times you think you're done writing the book is many. I sort of had a joke with my wife where I've submitted the book yet again to either a substantial editor or a copy editor or a proofreader, and I look over to my wife and I say, I finished writing the book again. But it's finally nearing. I'm actually getting set to record the audiobook today. You don't have a face like this and don't record an audiobook, a face for radio here. So I wrote this book. It's coming out in this coming fall, October 3rd. And a couple things. One, the book is deeply personal to me. It comes from my own sort of lived experience, both in my childhood and my career. The book is semi-autobiographical as well. And don't tell anyone. I've written I've written a philosophy book, which is disguised as a business book. I'm really trying to write of what some change I think we can create in humanity as a whole, and just using business as one of the vehicles to help us get there. The 2 inspirations behind writing the book. One, I grew up with a stutter. So I know what it feels like to have something to say, but to lack either the confidence or the physiology to speak up. So I know that horrid feeling of voicelessness. And perhaps you've been there before, where you have something to say, but you're reluctant to say it. So that's one. I ended up marrying a speech language pathologist. So good choice, not just for me, but more so for my children and nieces and nephews. We got that taken care of. The other is, in my 15 plus year career, I've been parts of teams and in relationships, whether it's with a team that I'm on with a senior leader or with clients, where there has been a speak up culture, where it is safe and worth it to speak up. You can share openly, and it's wonderful. The amount of trust, cooperation, innovation, health of the organization, as well as the people within it, it's marvelous. I've also been part, and perhaps you have as well, of different cultures where it feels a little bit more toxic or deleterious, where there isn't a speak up culture. It's more a zip it or a shut it culture, where you do not feel that it is safe nor worth the risk to speak up. And not only is that bad for the firm or the organization, it's bad for the people within it. We know that our relationship with our boss has more of an impact on our health than that of our relationship with our family doctor or our therapist, if we have one. And it's at par with our relationship with our life partner or spouse, if we have that as well. Our relationship with our boss matters. It impacts our health. And so I do write about the Boeing 737 MAX. I write about the fiasco with the Ford Pinto years ago. I talk about in the book and in my work, lines of work where if you don't do the job well, people die, right? But the mere fact is the stakes are high for anyone who's in a position of leadership, because if you are in a formal role of leadership, you have a life depleting or life feeding impact on the people around you. And I want leaders to be aware of that responsibility and to show up and choose wisely. So I can just share, Rob, how we define a speak up culture, and then see thoughts or questions you have so far, both from yourself and what's coming in. So definitions: what is a speak up culture? When I first started writing the book, I thought I was just doing a rebrand on psychological safety, which is a well-known body of work. It's been around for decades, very much put on the map by sort of two main events. One is Amy C. Edmondson and her amazing work. And the other is the Google Aristotle study, which proved that psychological safety, a feeling that it is safe to take interpersonal risk, was the #1 factor for a high-performing team, for business results. So if you want to talk about the ROI of this stuff, it's right there. As I got into the research and got into writing the book, I mean, a couple things. One, I wanted to rebrand psychological safety because I feel like we put a white lab coat on a very human experience. And so it was important for me to make it more accessible, easy to understand, more human, and easier to act upon. And so I got inspiration from good old Zig Ziglar's quote, "People don't buy drills, they buy holes." And so if psychological safety is, as it turns out, a drill, the whole is a speak up culture. That's what you get. Now, as I've dived into the work, it's actually more than psychological safety. There's another component, which is a lesser known body of work called perception of impact. That will my behaviors, actions actually lead to a positive impact, which means that the definition of a speak up culture is an environment in which people feel it is both safe and worth it to share their ideas, even if they're half baked. I once shared a half-baked idea at an executive team meeting. I was told that we don't share half-baked ideas at executive team meetings. We only share fully baked executive summary ideas. Guess what? That was the last time I shared an idea at that executive team because I was punished for bringing an idea, right? Concerns, even if they're unpopular or personal, a personal struggle we might be having that's impacting how we're showing up in our work, that is suitable for work, even if it's happening outside of work. Disagreements, especially with those more senior to you, how does that go? If you call the boss's baby ugly, but for good reason, is that well received? And can you have a constructive, positive conversation? One of the myths with psychological safety and a speak up culture is that, we only have nice conversations and it's, sunshine, rainbows, unicorns, lollipops all the time. That's not the case. When you have psychological safety in a speak up culture, it means that you can have the hardest, most productive conversations, have candor with care, or as Kim Scott calls it, radical candor. And then finally, people feel that it's actually worth it to admit mistake, believing it will lead to improvements and not being singled out and punished. So that's how I define a speak up culture. Rob, I'd love to see any questions or thoughts you have so far, or what's coming in from the chats.
Yeah, so feel free to place in the chat to see if you hear just some commentary. You mentioned, on the onset that a lot of us have probably been in both cultures, and from a personal story perspective as well. I find myself in cultures where it's like, this is literally what the rest of my career is going to look like, and that's what moved me towards a more purposeful world of building companies and HR technologies to build better workplaces. So I think we've all experienced it. So I think you have a lot of people on a similar mindset and wavelength. The one question I did have by myself, and then I'll take a look at the other items on the chat, is that when you looked at the ideas and concerns and disagreements and mistakes, it seemed a little more on the negative side, let's call it. And I think about my experience. I've been 20 years in things like, employee feedback, employee recognition. I'm wondering how that plays into a concept of a speak up culture, the ability to give feedback in certain ways, maybe in a positive mindset, or recognizing people's accomplishments, and just your thoughts around that.
Yeah. So chapter 9 in the book is called "Feedback is a Dish Best Shared." And then I like to put in brackets, "not served." That feedback is intended for growth and it's intended to spark dialogue. I definitely harp more, as you're now making me think, Rob, of shoot, I think I should rewrite the whole book. Not, I definitely focus a little bit more on the harder to bring up stuff of concerns, disagreements. I don't think this is going to work. This isn't safe. We're mistreating our people. There's more we can do. But it's also ideas to innovate. And innovation is never just one breakthrough idea. It's a cruddy idea added on another cruddy idea, and it iterates and it builds. And it's often done in teams and brainstorming. And I do talk about feedback, and I talk about feedback from both lenses, both constructive, which is how can we improve, as well as positive. Absolutely. There's studies that prove it. So if leaders completely ignore their direct reports, the likelihood that their direct reports are actively disengaged is increased by 40%. This is research out of Gallup. If you only point out your direct reports' weaknesses and what they need to work on, their active disengagement likelihood is 22%. It nearly increases by half because you simply acknowledge that your people exist, right? And if you go out of your way to point out just one strength, hey, Rob, you're great at this, keep doing it, right? And be, specific with what that great thing is. If we amplify the strengths of our people, their likelihood of active disengagement is about 1%. So my favorite formula for feedback, and it's fun to say, is FBI, right? Because one-liners are fine for jokes, not very good for recognition and feedback. So I could say, hey, Rob, great job today. And you're like, thanks. I have no idea what I did to earn such accolade, but thank you. Or I could say feeling, behavior, impact. I could say, Rob, I feel so supported by you and your team. Because behavior, we've been planning this for a long time, and I've seen how much time and effort and ideas and energy your team has put in. The impact is I want to do the best possible job for you in WorkTango and everyone who's here today, and I want to keep finding ways to work together and partner. That is way better than great job. I've worked with so many teams who, when talking about feedback, they only think about it constructively. There's a huge opportunity to provide positive, reinforcing, repeat, and amplify this behavior.
Awesome. I love the formula. I usually use SMT when it comes to recognition: specific, meaningful, and timely. Like, let's not wait to the end of the year. Let's make it meaningful to a purpose or value of the organization or customer sat or whatever it is. So I'm going to steal FBI.
Nice.
So there's a lot of really great questions. I might pick on a few that got voted higher, and feel free, Shed, to say, hey, we're going to talk about this a little later and punt it, but it's some really good activity happening. And this one comes from Heather, and a number of people upvoted it. And it's, how do you root out the leaders who are contributing to the unsafe culture? I find our middle managers are the biggest offenders, but they have mastered the art of deflection and blame.
So I would lean into, there's a brilliant matrix created by US Navy SEALs. US Navy SEALs are amongst the highest performing teams in the world. If they don't do their job, people die and the enemy goes to where they don't want the enemy to go. And I'm not going to debate over the practices of their selection processes, because there can be some argument of if it's the best thing to do. However, they do have high performing teams. And so when I've had the chance to work with a very now retired senior leader in the SEALs, and we asked him, how do you select and how do you promote? So how do you select people to become part of the SEAL teams, and how do you promote people to more senior ranks? And they have a matrix for it. And it's a matrix of performance and trust. And it has 9 boxes. So of course, we want the high performer of high trust. Of course, we do not want the low performer of low trust. But who do you pick between the high performer of low trust and the low performer of high trust? And 10 times out of 10, the SEALs would pick the low performer of high trust. I'll give you an example. To become a SEAL, you need to be a good swimmer. That's why we call them SEALs, ARF, right? SEALs are water-based. They often spend time where the enemy is least comfortable, which is in water at night. And so you have to be a really good swimmer. One of the first things that SEALs do when they sign up for BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, is they hop into a pool and they swim 25 meters, a 25-meter length, just to get a sense of their swimming ability. One young sailor who's trying out to become a SEAL hops into the pool, sinks to the bottom of the pool like a rock, walks across the bottom of the pool, touches the other end, turns around, and walks back. He's yanked out, nearly drowning and completely out of breath. Once he comes back to, and everyone's looking at him being like, what the heck are you doing, right? When he comes back to, the drill instructor says, "Sailor, what the heck are you doing?" To which he says, "Sir, I don't know how to swim." To which he goes, "We can teach you how to swim." That young sailor who does not yet know the skill of how to swim, which you can teach someone, even an adult, how to swim in a couple of weeks, if not less, right? But they displayed the right attributes to earn trust, which was courage, perseverance, tenacity, stupidity, whatever it might be, to hop in that pool, even though he didn't know how to swim. He proved that he had what it took. He had the intangibles, or as my friend Rich Deviney, who wrote this book, which I highly recommend, called The Attributes, he had the correct attributes to thrive as a SEAL, which means I think too often we put skills and performance on a pedestal in our cultures, as opposed to the ability for people to be good leaders and be good teammates, which is in our behavior. There are some things that we can take self-assessments on, like our levels of grit, our levels of drive, even our mental acuity, as Rich points out in his book. But we cannot say, like, I can't say to you, Rob, I'm a great leader. If I do, I suggest you run far away from me. I cannot say I'm empathetic. I cannot say I'm a great listener. I cannot say I'm a great teammate. You know who has more of an important evaluation of that? The people who I lead, supposedly, and the people who are on my team. And so I think I write in the book that we need to define what we mean by leadership. I think the mere fact that we have the term servant leader means that our definition of leadership is broken. Leaders serve. Without service, without selflessness, without empathy, compassion, being a good listener, being decisive and yet owning when your decisions don't go well and giving credit when they do go well, these are the behaviors of leadership. And so I think we need to define what we mean by leadership in our society as well as in our organizations. And then if we stop at a definition, it's meaningless. We have to make hard decisions and select people against those definitions and figure out selection processes that tease it out. Because if I ask you in a 45-minute interview, hey, Rob, are you empathetic? Yes. Why? Yes, I am. Versus creating a scenario where I get to actually see, are you empathetic? Whether that's with great behavioral questions, role plays, or if teamwork is really important, do an interview in an escape room and see how that goes. How do they perform as a team when the stakes are high, whether simulated or not? And so I'm really a big fan of throwing some uncertainty, change, stress, curveballs into the interview process, because you get to see someone's true colors. So we need to define leadership, select better leaders against that definition, and then help leaders lead. We need to give them training and development, even if it's a cheap book club. Give these leaders something to be in a community of practice, which is a group of people who agree to grow together, to talk about the challenges, work on their ability to lead. And we need to be really mindful. I like to say in our cultures, we get the behavior we reward and we get the behavior we tolerate. So if you have people who are seemingly high performers, but they're awful to work with, and you keep promoting them, and you wonder why you have a toxic culture where your leaders are drivers, you need to look at what are your training and selection, and you need to create a more 360 view. Like, how wonderful would it be if you actually have a say in the leader that you work for, that you get to choose and you get to have a voice in that.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you talk about the leaders, and sometimes they're forgotten employees, and they might be like the Navy SEAL individual that can't swim. They do need some of that training and some of the skills as well. There are a number of questions, but I think some of them kind of play a bit on in your narrative. So I want to give the opportunity to kind of continue to share, Shed,
Sure.
some of the main points for the webinar today, and I'll kind of keep an eye on these. And just a reminder to folks, put your questions in the Q&A, and folks can see those and upvote those as well.
Thank you, Rob. Wonderful. And yes, we do have more prepared here. And if there's anything I don't answer by the end, please feel free to connect on LinkedIn, or hop over to my website and submit the question so we can chat about it more as well. So the two main axes for creating an environment in which people feel it's both safe and worth it to speak up are safety and impact. So when talking about a speak up culture where people feel that it is safe and worth it to share ideas, concerns, disagreements, and mistakes, which is good for business, it helps the team get closer together. It helps us make better decisions and innovate. Obviously, we want this upper right quadrant, high safety, high impact. I speak up because it's safe and worth it. Now, what's interesting is both safety and impact are perceptions. Rob, you and I could work for the same leader. I could say, wow, like what an amazing leader. I feel that it's so safe for me to speak up and share my voice and opinion. And you go, are you sure we work for the same leader? I have an awful relationship with them. And here's the thing, we're both right. And to say that an organization or a leader is an ideal or perfect speak up leader, absolutely not. It's based on perception, and not every leader, team, or organization is perfectly designed for every person. We ought to find the spaces and places where we can thrive, both on the right bus and in the right seat. Of course, we don't want the low safety, low impact quadrant. It's just not worth it to speak up. It neither feels safe nor worth it. This is an unhappy marriage between fear and apathy. I'm afraid, and even if I did speak up, it wouldn't lead to any meaningful change, is my belief. I've been there. I've seen others there. It's no fun, and it's awful for our confidence, health, and well-being, notwithstanding the fact that you have people who are literally, this is where we see quiet quitting and resignation, because I'll just do the bare minimum, get by. I don't want to stand out. I keep my head low. High safety, low impact is really interesting. I'll speak up, but I don't think it'll matter or make any meaningful change, whether it's due to bureaucracy, systemic issues, or change in habits that are simply too hard. Like I could say to a friend that I know eats chocolate cake every single night, who's trying to become healthier, the feedback's pretty obvious there. And I might feel safe to share that feedback with them. I just don't think it will lead to any meaningful change in behavior or results for them. So I might speak up, but I don't think it'll go anywhere. So I'll probably stop speaking up after a while. This one is really interesting to me. Low safety, high impact. I'm afraid to speak up, but the stakes are too high to remain silent. This could be about health and safety. This could be about our values, right? This could be that, you see that leaders on the team are behaving counter to the values that we espouse, or this could be a very real case, which was Ed Pearson at Boeing, who was on the 737 MAX production line. The 737 MAX was the plane that was grounded after two of them in perfect weather conditions went down and killed 346 people. And Ed was on the production line seeing that the plane being made at the Renton, Washington facility in Boeing, in his view, wasn't a safe plane. And though he did not feel safe and at risk to his own job, reputation, relationships, he displayed the courage to speak up because he felt so connected to the stakes. What ended up happening, because oftentimes in low safety, high impact, we do speak up, but all of a sudden we become the problem and we become the scapegoat. This can often lead to whistleblowing. As we saw with Ed Pearson, as we saw with Kimberly Young McClear, who's in the U.S. Coast Guard as well. So that's just an interesting dynamic of how do we create a speak up culture, which is the two things that leaders have to do to create an environment where more and more people feel that it is both safe and worth it to speak up, is a virtuous cycle of two actions: encourage and reward. And I think this is a nice tie-in, Rob, to the work that you all do at WorkTango, because you're very much in the rewards and recognition space. Catch people doing the right thing and tell them to keep doing it, especially if it takes courage, especially if it's hard to do. So the two actions that leaders take, and then we'll pause here and see what comments and further questions we have before we talk about some pickles. Yes, we will be talking about pickles in this webinar. The two actions that leaders do to create a speak up culture is they encourage people to speak up. And then when people do, they reward the behavior. And what's lovely about this is it ripples as well. That if someone speaks up and it goes well, especially when they bring up the hard stuff and the hard things to hear, bad news never gets better with time. If they're rewarded, they're all the more likely to speak up, and they tell their friends and colleagues and peers, and they talk about it with people outside of work, of what type of culture they have at work. Similarly, if you get punished or repeatedly ignored for speaking up, you're just not going to keep doing it, and you'll tell your friends it's not worth it either, right? It ripples. This is positively or negatively contagious. So the actions of encourage are, we've tried to do it in this conversation. It's going well. We want to hear from you, and you are loading up the Q&A in the chat, which is lovely, right? So that's one way in a webinar format. In a team, you could say, hey team, I really value your perspective and opinion. I want to hear it, right? One very senior pilot says to his flight crew every single time, and he has an amazing safety record, I've never flown a perfect flight, and today is no exception. Meaning he's creating the condition, that pilot is creating the condition, speak up, share what you see. I depend on you for the success of a safe flight. Encouraging could be, hey team, I'm not getting any feedback from you, so I'm going to tell them myself. Here's what I think I could be doing better. What do you think? Right? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, how clear is my presentation? And if you all say 10, I think you're lying. I want the 6s and the 7s and the 3s. I want to improve. Please be honest, right? So we're doing everything in our power to encourage. It could be breakout rooms. It could be anonymous even. I'd rather anonymous feedback than no feedback at all. But creating everything in your power to get people to share ideas, concerns, disagreements, and mistakes. And then when they do, you must reward the behavior, especially if it's hard to hear. And reward doesn't necessarily mean a promotion, a raise, a bonus, or a statue made in your name at the front of the office. Those are all extrinsic rewards and not likely what I'm talking about here. Reward is far more intrinsic. Reward means thank you. That must have taken courage to share. I appreciate you speaking up. We didn't implement your idea, but here's why from a strategic perspective, but great thinking. Keep it coming. Hey, I'm not yet seeing what you see. Can you explain to me how you got to that recommendation, right? And then providing meaningful feedback to help that person grow, or hey, you're actually onto something. All of those are forms of rewards. And when you reward people for speaking up, you're all the more likely to hear their voice again. If you repeatedly ignore or punish people, you will get a culture of silence.
Love it. Yeah, it's interesting. I've been in the space of recognition rewards for almost 2 decades now. And when you build that culture, I think it's more about that recognition. What gets recognized gets repeated, and you want to build that culture. And I had a question before getting some of the how questions. I feel like we're in the how phase of the discussion today, but it kind of gets to what Barrett made a comment about. We give kudos in our daily updates on our intranet to employees who speak up to make things better. Are there any examples of really great rituals or ways people can infuse this into the culture of their organization as a prescriptive takeaway that we can do with our teams tomorrow, or organizations tomorrow?
Yeah. So a few things come to mind. So one, a client and colleague of mine, she was working in an environment where she was working at headquarters, and she was working with a subsidiary office, and the office happened to be in India, where speaking up culturally is harder to do. And so what she did is she insisted that the next team meeting, that the people from headquarters actually traveled to India to have the meeting in India, to show that it, like, that sort of offer of deference and equality, we're coming to you. And then she insisted that at the end of every meeting, or even at the beginning if they needed it, they built in a ritual called a speak up moment. And they created some healthy ground rules of things that we will do and things that we will not do, to create this environment where people felt that it was safe and worth it to speak up. That FBI ritual is great, and just those, whether SMT or FBI, but to say, hey, I've got feedback, and don't make them guess if it's positive or if it's constructive. Like if it's positive, hey, I want to acknowledge you, like let me know when you have a good time, or I want to have a constructive conversation. Those are a few rituals. One thing that I do anytime I co-facilitate with someone, I will always call them right after, and I will ask them 2 questions, ask us 2 questions. What went well and what could go better next time? And so building in sprint retrospectives or debriefs or hot washers or whatever it is as a ritual. And what's wonderful is I keep doing it and I keep doing it, that sometimes they'll beat me to it and they'll call me first, and they'll tell on themselves, I messed up slide 13. I don't even have to tell them, right? And I'm like, it's okay, no one noticed, but what would you do different next time? Or how can we get better at that piece next time? So building in these rituals, because the goal is not fearlessness. That's an idealized notion. No one is fearless. And if you do come across someone who seems fearless, they're likely dangerous. Fear is a risk modulator. It's important. But the role of leadership in a speak up culture is to create less fear and rituals to make it easier and easier and safer and worth it to speak up.
Love it. Okay, so number of questions, and one that's kind of the highest voted here, and it kind of gets to a bit of the how, a little more specifically. How do you encourage speak up culture at work when you are a minority, the only person of color in a predominantly white organization, as an example? And any thoughts around that, Shed?
So one, I think we need to find allies, because to say that that's on you is unfair. And so, I think first and foremost, do we feel that there is a healthy and safe enough forum to bring up that comment? There's a brilliant colleague of mine, Dr. Leanne Davey, put a great article out called A Different Take on Psychological Safety. One is there's legitimate psychological danger. Other times there's fear of aversive outcome or a fear of oneself. So I think, can you take a modest, reasonable risk and speak up? But I think first and foremost, we need to find allies and friends who can help us create and make a change, because it is harder to speak up when we are a minority. It just simply is, and there's more risk to it. So I think we need to unearth it, talk about the fact that, it is easier for certain people to speak up, and then we need good leadership to call upon, encourage the voice of those who are less likely to speak up, whether by their personality, race, whatever it might be, and then create the condition where it is safer and worth it for people to speak up. One of my favorite things to do in a meeting is, there's one person I'm thinking of who's very introverted, and I always know that they're thinking, but they very seldomly speak up. And so I pulled them aside after one meeting and I said, I know it is not your tendency or style to hop into the spotlight and speak up, but I know that you have things to say. Are you okay if I call upon you, or are you willing to raise your hand, and we'll give you space, because it might take you a few moments to get that idea out. So I think we need allies, and then I think we need to create meaningful and systemic change to make it safer and worth it.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And I want to actually bring up another question here, because I think it gets to a bit of the how and a different lens. And it says, I'm fortunate to have a team to feel comfortable to share their thoughts and experiences. I think sounds like a really good speak up culture, but I only had so much power to change things. What can a mid-level leader do to speak up and be a megaphone for their team? And I'm going to change the question a bit, because a couple of comments and other questions were around, well, what if you don't feel action will actually take place? So I think there's kind of a combination of, how do you be a megaphone? But like, if you're not expecting action to take place, or that's a demoralizing feeling of not wanting to speak up, maybe back to your matrix there, any thoughts or hows to get around that, those issues?
So being in the middle is underrated, and because so two things happen. So one, or 2 points I want to make. One, the tail can wag the dog, and two, managers, those in the middle, are the only people in an organization who have multi-directional influence, and senior leaders are envious of it. Okay, when you are in the middle, you can influence up, you definitely influence side to side, and you influence down. If you're at the most senior level, you can't influence up unless it's the board, right? And the more senior you get, the further away you get from the truth, because we're a hierarchical species and we're biologically wired to offer our leaders deference. You talk smack about a leader behind their back, they walk into the room, hello, ma'am, hello, sir, whatever it might be, right? We're biologically wired to offer them deference because of their status and because of the influence that they have on us. And so I think first and foremost, we have to realize that we actually have influence, and sometimes a ton of influence, and how can we use that multi-directional influence for the better? And the other is the tail can wag the dog. Obviously, it's ideal to have senior leaders who believe in this and who embody it and who have the humility to know that they're imperfect, and to take responsibility to create some change, but that's not always the case. But you can decide that your sphere of influence becomes a great, healthy speak up culture. And then all of a sudden people love showing up to work, and your results are better, and people want to join your team. Or when people leave your team and get a promotion or go to a different team, they inculcate and they spread what you've created. So you can actually shift and change and create change from the middle. It just can take a bit more time. It's more evolution than it is revolution.
Awesome. All right. So I want to be conscious of time. I know there's some other, we talked a bit about defining it. Is it, why do this, and is it worth it? And some of the hows. So I know there's some more items you want to share. We'll dive in, and then try to get to as many questions as possible.
Beautiful. I'll share a couple more points, and then we'll spend the rest of the time on the great questions that are coming in. This is fantastic. Also, thank you for your engagement and great questions and participation. So I promised that I would talk about pickles, and I can't just leave that one hanging. So another key piece here is culture and the environment that we proliferate as team members, as leaders. And when talking about culture, I like to use the analogy of pickles and of pickle brine, because so often if we have underperformers, we blame the person, or we blame the cucumber, and we don't examine the culture, the environment, or the brine, if you will. You can take a world-class cucumber that has won awards, put that cucumber in awful pickle brine, and we, my friends, have an awful pickle that should never have been made. ever, right? We can take a mediocre or a weak cucumber, put it in excellent brine, and we have an excellent, crispy, whatever to your liking pickle, which means the environment matters more than the people. You can take an amazingly talented, high-performing, high-trusting person, put them in an unhealthy environment, and they're capable of of being miserable, being demotivated, or even doing unethical or wrong things. Similarly, we can take someone who's been underperforming, put them in a great environment, and they're capable of doing great things. How often do we take someone who's just in the wrong role, put them in the right role, align with their strengths, and they thrive? So that's one piece. Another is we've created a culture, an equation for culture in the book, and it brings to that piece of the influence that we have, which I just spoke about with being in the middle and having influence in the middle. I myself have had roles in my career where I had no authority, but I had influence and I could still drive and create change, especially because I had the ear of more senior folks who had the authority. So this is the equation for culture that we've put together. Culture equals values multiplied by behavior to the power of influence. Of course, organizations ought to have values, but if we don't live them, anything multiplied by 0 is a 0, right? Worse, if we have values, but we live counter to them, anything multiplied by a negative is a negative. And the more senior, the more influence you have, the more deleterious and toxic that culture can be. So ideally, we have values defined. I'm a big fan of values defined with behaviors and with verbs so that we're more likely to do it. The 4 values for Enron as they entered into their huge accounting scandal a number of years ago, they were respect, communication, integrity, which is hilarious, and excellence. Excellence personally is my least favorite value because it's kind of meaningless. Hey, Rob, for the rest of the day, just more excellence, please. Get right on that, Shed. Like, it's meaningless, right? Or I could say, hey, Rob, do more of your best work. That's interesting. That means I should focus on my strengths. I should focus on teaming or delegating on things that are my limitations or are my weaknesses. That actually helps me behave into the value. So our cultures are strong when we have our values defined and in behaviors, and then we actually live them. And we reward and recognize and offer feedback or coaching or discipline when people live outside of them. And if they repeatedly live outside of them, as Ken Blanchard taught me, you can offer them to the competition. And then this is all raised to the power of influence, because the more influence you have in a culture, the more your individual values and behaviors bear weight on that culture. It means more if a CEO is living in line or out of line with those values than it is someone who we hired last week in a more junior role. It's just what it is. We are a hierarchical species. The last thing I'll share here is that when it comes to creating change in our leaders and in our cultures, there are 3 gears that all move together. One is mindset, the next is actions, and the last is systems. A mindset, a transformation is inside out. We cannot outsource transformation. That shift in mindset happens from the inside out. But when leaders shift their mindset and go, oh, my people and purpose matter. Oh, it matters to catch my people doing things right and calling that out. A shift in mindset can literally shift everything. Second, we can act our way to new thinking. There's a brilliant story from David Marquet, who's a retired U.S. Navy submarine captain, who literally transformed the entire culture of that submarine and took it from worst to first by shifting some little things. One of the things that he did is he created an action that anytime there was a guest on board their submarine who could have been an auditor, like a mystery shopper, he equipped everyone with a script, which was anytime you see a visitor on board the USS Santa Fe, which what he was captain of, he said, you must stop them, greet them, shake their hand, look them in the eye, say your name, what you do on board, and say, welcome aboard the Santa Fe. That was a script that he enforced that everyone did. Now, after the evaluator came in and saw this, he went, wow, everyone's proud to be on board. And then he showed it to everyone. Hey, look, the evaluator said you're proud to be here. Now, that cannot be the only initiative that you do, but you can't say, hey, Rob, act with more pride to be on board or be part of this team. You can't do it. But he equipped them with a script to back into that feeling and made it more likely that people would live into it. And then finally, like I said, if you put a good person in a bad system or a bad culture, that culture or system will prevail every time. We need shift in mindset, the shift in how we behave, and then a shift in creating systems, policies, whatever it might be, such that people can behave into this stuff. And it's healthy all the time to examine what we should continue doing, what we should stop doing, and what we ought to start doing as well.
Awesome. I have to admit, when I saw the slide on the culture equation, values times behavior and influence, you think about why organizations do this and conduct these types of activities or strategies. And again, after living it for almost 2 decades, just seeing the impact on amplifying those values. Again, and we see it all the time with recognition rewards, but even adding accountability to that, right? Checking in on employees. Are leadership living those values? Are they conducting the behaviors that we've aligned are really important in the organization here. And just, I've seen it move and change cultures. It's not overnight. It's a bit of a dial, not a switch, but it's just, I've kind of seen that in real practice, and it's just a fantastic equation that I will also rip off and duplicate from this discussion.
Put it on a t-shirt and sell it. Thanks, Rob.
I'm all about the t-shirts. It's our passion statement to improve work lives. So I want to get to a couple of questions that are here. Again, try to get to them all, but I think it'll be tough. But the one that's upvoted the most right now, which I think is really, really interesting, it says, I'm curious if you'd recommend that organizations seeking to create a speak up culture should also get some explicit boundaries. For example, a guideline that says you can always express your ideas, but we expect you to be respectful of others in doing so. Like, are there any rules of engagement in these types of initiatives to put us in the right framework of what we could possibly structure in our organizations?
Beautiful. Yeah. Having a speak up culture isn't licensed to treat people without respect, tact, professionalism, decency. So I love that. So a couple things. One, sucking up is not the same as speaking up. So if you have someone who takes up a lot of space or air in the room, there's feedback there too of, we need to hear from a more diverse set of voices, not just the same extroverted person, and same gendered and same, like, we need to create the condition and even give someone feedback. Hey, like, speak last, or wait, or write down a note, or create more space for others. The other thing with a speak up culture is, and I've seen this a lot when I've done work in certain industries, often law enforcement and military, that speaking up means that you yell or you're very loud, and it's whenever you want to do it. We need to practice a couple things. One is the platinum rule instead of the golden rule, and to realize that we don't have automatic transmissions, we have manual transmissions. So the golden rule we all learn in kindergarten, Rob: treat others the way you wish to be treated, which is basic decency and respect. But that's fine for when kids are 6, not so good for an adult professional, because it lacks empathy. I'm far more a fan of the platinum rule, which is treat others the way they wish to be treated, which requires empathy and relationship building. And it's why we have these assessments like DISC and Insights and Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder, and the love languages, or the appreciation languages at work, to help us get better at figuring out, how can I best treat others so that they'll hear it, they'll listen, it'll be good timing, right? And then the other is, if you have something to share, to lean into our manual transmission. What I mean by that is, oftentimes, we speak up and we think it's automatic transmission: drive, park, reverse, right? Drive is fight, reverse is flight, and park is an oscillation of fight or flight called freeze, but it's really an oscillation. I think if we do have something to say, it behooves us to be mindful of what gear, right? There's different approaches based on the context and the personalities. I could come to you and say, I have feedback. Is now a good time? And you could say, Shed, I totally, I'm not here right now. I have a gap today at 3:30. Can we go for a walking meeting then? I'm like, great, right? So just because we have something to share that could be valuable, it isn't licensed to share it without respect or tact or platinum rule or context or empathy. So I think that's table stakes, and it's a great question.
Awesome. Yeah, the way I've attacked that in the past is, in the similar example that you mentioned of the FBI, it's, hey, the individual brought up their conversation this way. This is how it was approached. That reacted into a certain conversation and a result. And I find sometimes when you recognize the actual behaviors of the actual feedback, motion, it really helps support that that understanding of what the right framework or guideline looks and feels like. If people, don't understand, at least they can see it in action, so to speak.
And whether you're in a role of formal leadership or not, if someone comes to you and says, I have feedback for you to, especially if you're a leader, to say, I really value what you have to share, but I want to give it my full attention. Thank you for the courage to bring this up. Can we chat at X time and then actually do it if it isn't a good time to receive that feedback right now?
I'm really curious. I've been doing a lot of talks lately on concepts of feedback, but I've been approaching it as asking for advice, just because folks want to give you something that's a little more actionable. It's easier to give here's what I think you should do versus here's what I think you did, and it's good or bad or indifferent. I'm just curious on your take on just that idea of feedback and advice, or any way to ask for it or discuss it in a way that might open up a better conversation.
So in terms of soliciting feedback, or
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to give someone feedback, I wouldn't suggest saying, "Can you give me advice?" That's insincere and manipulative. But I think, and I've seen studies and research that prove it is far more action oriented to say, "Hey, Rob, I really want to improve on my presentation style. What advice would you give me to get better?" I think, and you can try both and test it out and see what happens. But I think that advice piece, you far more get more actionable advice. But is that what you found as well? Because I feel like you've done more research on this than I have.
Yeah, I've just found that people seem to open up, and people are willing to give advice, which is a little more future forward versus considering what they did in the past. So I know we have 7 minutes. I know you wanted to share some last couple of items, so I'll let you do that, and then we'll dive in through as many remaining questions as possible.
Great, amazing. I'll do this as quick as we can. We had a few ideas, so I think on the side of advice and action, we have a few thoughts on what you can do leaving this webinar to create more of a speak up culture in your team, in your organization, in your relationships, quite frankly. One, encourage people to share their ideas, concerns, disagreements, and mistakes. And if and when they do, reward them for doing so. Even if you don't like what they hear, if you think it's foolish, stupid, wrong, thank them for the behavior and the courage to do so, and then work from there, or provide feedback or tweaks to make the quality of what they share even better. But it's not up for us to discern the quality, or to say that their feelings are wrong, that we can quickly get into gaslighting or toxic positivity there. Reward the behavior, and in doing so, you'll make it safer and more worth it for others to keep doing it, them and others. Enact your values. Remember that culture equation, and the purpose of your values are not to put them on a screensaver, on your Zoom background, or on the walls. It's to actually use them in your behaviors, in the halls and in meeting rooms, whether they're virtual or in physical space. Recognize and reward people when they behave the values. Offer feedback and coaching to those who don't. Again, we get the behavior we reward, we get the behavior that we tolerate. And finally, mind your influence. As a leader, whether capital L or lowercase l, I'm much more of a fan of leader through behavior. When you have influence, which we all do to some degree, some more than others, our whisper is a shout, and our tiptoes are stomps. So those are a few actions. Rob, anything you just double click on or add before I share one more slide?
No, I think it was a good summary. I'll let you wrap it up.
Great. This is the book. Please keep making it safe and worth it for those around you to speak up. And you do not get the decision to say, "Hey, I'm a great speak up leader." The people who you lead and the people who are around you make that call. So solicit and ask for their feedback, ask for their advice. If you want to check out more about the book, please head on over to speakupculture.com, and feel free to connect on the socials as well. I'm most active on LinkedIn, but I'm in all the places, and I'll put some more information on how you can reach me and engage in the chat here. But that's everything we prepared. Happy to do another question if we have, and then I know, Rob, you have some closing comments as well.
So we'll get through as many last questions, some wonderful feedback in the chat. The highest voted one right now basically says, as a non-binary employee, how can I bring up the need for acceptance, open-mindedness, and pronoun respect in an apolitical organization with teammates who believe it may be a political conversation? I love the idea of a safe speak-up culture, but I'm not sure how to best approach these unfortunately politically charged conversations.
Yes. So I think it was either Coinbase or there was one tech company that essentially banned all political conversation and anything that was not to do with work. And 40% of their employees resigned as soon as that was announced. And so I think first and foremost, to be, I think, an effective, progressive, relevant organization in 2023, we have to acknowledge that there are things going on in our places of work, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or a physical space, and beyond and outside of that impact how we show up. This could be around gender, race, discrimination, everything. You know, if it impacts your thoughts and well-being, it impacts your work. And so I think we need to create spaces where it is safe and worth it to talk about stuff, again, concerns, whether personal or potentially taboo or unpopular. Again, I think the advice is similar: to find at least one other safe person or ally whom you trust, where you can begin and share. This was the case of Kimberly Young McClear, who's an openly gay woman of color, same-sex marriage. And she was harassed and discriminated, unfortunately. And she was very outspoken and continues to be. I so admire her and I feature her in the book. More and more people flocked toward her because she stood out and she spoke up. But I would encourage you to find others where you feel that it's safe, and see if you can speak up and create positive change. And if not, find those communities, whether it's within your place of work or other places where it is safe and worth it. I never want to be in a position to say you should quit your job. Absolutely not. But I encourage you to find communities, safe communities, with allies where it is safe and worth it to talk about gender, talk about anything that is of importance to you, whether it's at your place of work or beyond.
Awesome. So with about 60 seconds left, I wanted to wrap up with a couple of things. 3 things. First is that if you don't mind sharing the slide there, Shed.
Absolutely.
Just if you ever want any more additional resources from WorkTango on these types of topics, and there were some really great articles on similar ones, feel free to go to our website. Fantastic research there. The second is that we actually have our next webinar coming up in May. No, sorry, we're in May. It is in September. There we go. Dr. Jessica Kriegel talking about building great cultures, and you'll get more information and invites to that. But the last thing I want to say, and maybe we can kill the slides for this part, is just a big thank you. Actually, yeah, that worked out pretty well. First off, a thank you for all of the folks on the webinar and for joining the WorkTango community. Hopefully you found value in it. A big thank you for folks that asked questions, and sorry we didn't get to them all, but this tells me that there's this topic is really interesting and important, and how can we create more spaces for those discussions. A big thank you and appreciation for the WorkTango team. There's a lot of work to put this on, and they're on the back end making this stuff happen and flawlessly. But a big thank you to you, Shed. Again, like you said, we've spoken at similar events or have seen each other speak 4 or 5 times now. Always find value, always find great takeaways. And I know you're writing a book and putting it into market. It's a busy time for you, but thanks for making space for us and time as well. So, much appreciated. And I'm seeing a lot of these kind of claps in the chat and thank yous as well. So hopefully, I think I'm not the only one in that sentiment. So much appreciated.
Thank you all. Thank you, Rob and team. And thanks all for joining. I hope what we shared today helps you be a better Speak Up leader.
Awesome. Have a great rest of the Wednesday, everyone, and take care.